Alright YouTube, I thought I'd make a video about abortion, which is long overdue, and is sponsored by Wigglesworth on ICQ Christianity Chat. Thank you Wigglesworth for being a complete jackass. So let's begin. Abortion. Why is it anyone's choice but the woman's to have an abortion? How does this make logical sense? On the one hand, you're saying, well, the baby has a right to live. Well, if you classify it as life, of course it does. That remains to be seen. However, the woman is definitely alive and a human being, and it's her body. So I fail to see the logic behind that. I find it hilarious that the same fundamentalists who are against abortion are also against contraception, which prevents abortions from happening in the first place. I also find it amusing that the church comes out swinging against abortion, says traditional family values, despite the fact that more than half of the marriages they perform end in divorce, the fact that half their priests are molesting children. It's rather funny. And then you, of course, it's not just the Catholics. You have like the Ted Haggards of the world. Ted Haggard, of course, very strong anti-gay, anti-abortion, anti-contraception Protestant. Turns out he's actually gay himself. He was going to male hookers, smoking methamphetamine or taking it some other way, I don't know, inserting it into his anus or whatever, and then giving the hooker blowjobs. So, you've got the hypocrisy on one hand, you've also got the stupidity. Whenever I'm confronted with somebody who's telling me abortion is a sin, abortion is terrible, this is what I do. And I would appreciate it if you'd share this video around so people can hear my kernels of wisdom on the topic of abortion. Because people need to know, because apparently the rate of people that supports abortion is actually declining. That's scary, so we need to wake more people up. Let's say that your sister or your daughter or your mother or, your best female friend was, raped. Would you support their right to abort? In most cases, and because rape is still a fairly uncommon crime, it does happen, unfortunately, far too much, but it doesn't happen to most people who live. In civilized nations, that is. If you go to Afghanistan, they're all molested, because they're like property. Ask them. If their relative was raped, would they support their right to have an abortion? Most of them will say no, but their track record says they would. Guess why? Because these people are living in a delusion. They're not living in reality. They live an idealistic existence where there's no bad things, and there's no sin, and Jesus doesn't judge you. The problem being this, they're off in La La Land. When reality actually punches them in the fucking testicles, then they see reality the way it really is. Brutish, ugly, and disgusting. Because someone they know might get raped. Of course, in a fundamentalist community, if you're raped, are you really going to tell your parents? Are you really going to tell your friends? Probably not. Because, number one, you're going to feel shame. Well, isn't that technically premarital sex? And, oh, well, what if I do choose to get an abortion? Everyone will hate me. That's what... Do you people feel good making your children and your siblings and everyone else around you feel guilty for something that they weren't responsible for? Do you people get some sort of insane hard-on by causing misery to children? Let's say that a 10-year-old is raped by her father, impregnated, and will die on the slab if she doesn't have an abortion. Would you support it then? To save her life? Well, no, because you're still killing the baby. It's not the baby's fault that it was a rape baby. It has every right to live. Note that the eugenics movement, which sponsored abortions and contraception and sterilizations for minorities and, atheists and so forth, and pagan Native American groups back in the 1910s through the 1970s, was co-opted by the church. The same churches, and here's a little-known fact, because most people don't even know what the eugenics movement is. The eugenics movement, which started in the 1910s in the United States and spread, of course, to the Nazis later, their racialism was based on American eugenics. The eugenics movement looked to the ideal of the sort of white Protestant family unit. The idea that through better breeding and through, high reproduction for the middle and upper class, the whites, the Protestants, and sometimes the Catholics, and generally lowering the breeding rate on what they considered scum, the minorities, the atheists, the pagans, that would improve the world, that it was natural selection at work. Ironically, very Darwinistic for groups which generally didn't agree with Darwin. The eugenics movement sponsored sterilizations, abortions, and contraceptive usage, often with no warning label and no warning about what it did, because back then it wasn't as effective, to minorities and all these groups. The churches went for it 100%. Most mainstream churches supported abortion during this period of time. It wasn't until later when eugenics began to die out that they no longer supported it and told us it was a sin. Let me tell you the ultimate ideal on what I think about abortion. I don't think that old, white, Christian men should be making the decisions pertaining to abortion. Unfortunately, old, white, Christian men run most of the government. That's the problem. So, of course, in more civilized areas of the country, abortion is more or less unchallenged. Here in Vermont, I don't think there have been any protests in the last 20 years about the issue. Most people up here support it. But there are still those fundamentalists who are brain dead enough to ignore the fact that anyone that they know could be raped at any time, and there'd be nothing they could do about it, or anyone they know could have some physical malformation causing them to die during childbirth, and yet they still plow ahead with what they call the Federal Marriage Amendment, which they've proposed several times to federally ban abortion. It's blatantly unconstitutional. It'll never actually pass unless we get a whole bunch of idiots in the Supreme Court, and we'd have to have idiots in the Congress and an idiot president at the same time as well. Any one of those things lacking would shoot it down, because it is blatantly unconstitutional to tell women they can't abort. They still plow ahead with this in short-sighted glee at the misery of others. I will note, and this is fact, you can check the fucking facts yourself. The primary reason for abortion in the United States is, drumroll please, contraception lacking sex education. Sex education which doesn't include contraception. When you talk about abstinence only, guess what you deny? Human nature. Teens and 20-somethings have lots of premarital sex. Almost everyone does, whether they're fundamentalist or not. And the fundamentalist housewives probably go out and bang the milkman too. Well, what if they get pregnant from the milkman? If your wife gets pregnant off another man, is abortion suddenly okay? Case in point, Herman Cain. Big-time idiot Republican would-be president. Pizza man, essentially, saying, imagine there's no pizza to the tune of Imagine by John Lennon. Real goofball, no credentials whatsoever. Said, I am pro-life from conception, no exceptions. And he repeated that like a parrot throughout the entire duration of his short campaign, thankfully. No exceptions. Well, the newscaster asked him, well, what if it was your daughter? Because he's got daughters. What if your daughter was raped? Would you support abortion? He completely skirted the issue. Because he can't answer the question. Because he just said he makes no exceptions. But guess what? And this is a big thing. You must understand this about especially the big money evangelical names. If their female relative was raped, they would absolutely support them getting an abortion. They would make the excuse, well, God forgives all sin, just go pray about it and you'll know what to do. Because they're a bunch of hypocrites. They tell us all day, well, you shouldn't have an abortion. Us little people with lorded over morality. Oh, well, look how moral we are. We've got our mega churches and we've got our golden crosses. We're so moral. Don't have an abortion. Don't use condoms. What do you think they do? You people are completely deluded if you think 99% of those televangelists and priests aren't banging. You're completely deluded if you think many of them haven't had relatives that they've encouraged to have abortions. That's the way of the world. That is reality as it really is, not some spiritual pipe dream. That is reality, not this interwoven fantasy that these idiots create. I tell you this. I refuse, even if I was a Christian, I would start listening to the church if they expunged all the child-molesting priests and pastors, if they expunged all the hypocritical bigots that ramble on and fucking on about gays and atheists and pagans and abortions and all of these things which do not concern them. I would listen to them when they actually began paying the bills of unwed mothers who did decide to keep their babies, and or fundamentalist women who pop out a baby every year and then claim it's God's will while living off of welfare most of the time. When they finally take care of those people, instead of gilding their decorative churches with gold and buying limousines and especially like things like the armored Pope mobile that the Nazi Pope drives around in, 3-inch thick plate glass that's absolutely bulletproof. You could fucking shoot a grenade at it out of a rocket launcher and it would barely scratch the Pope mobile. He's got so much faith. You've got these predominantly old, white, bigoted men telling women what they can and can't do with their bodies, dooming them to hell if they ever transgress the laws of Jesus. Let me ask you this. When did Jesus talk about abortion? Did he mention gay rights? Did he mention atheists? I don't see it in the Bible, so why are you so worked up about it? It's a political ploy. They want control over people. They want to create this idealistic, nonsense, fairy tale world in which there's no crime and there's no rape, and everyone spends 25 hours a day praising the Lord. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen. You people seem to thrive, and by people I mean mainly fundamentalists. I'm not even talking about most Christians. Many Christians support abortion and contraception and gay rights. Case in point, Vermont. Still 70% of the population's Christian, but almost nobody opposes these things. I doubt you could find many Vermonters who haven't used condoms. These people lord over this fake fucking holiness, and they say, don't do this, don't do that. The Lord will smite you, send you to everlasting hellfire. You know what? When you people get in shape and stop being such bigoted hypocrites, maybe then I'll listen to you on morality. But until then, you can shut the fuck up, because I don't want to hear it. And for you to attempt to push your idiotic political points off as morality is stupid. And for you to hypocritically brag about how holy you are when half of your priests and pastors are pedophiles, and some of them are racists, and some of them are wife beaters, and some of them are drug addicts, and they're just as fallible and stupid as the rest of the sheeple. It's just stupidity. It's just absolute fucking stupidity. You people don't have a leg to stand on. If you want to take away women's rights, you could always convert to Islam and go over to one of those nations that govern based on religious laws. Those countries, they're governed by religion. They're supposed to be holy and good and treat people nicely and with respect, and they worship the same God you do. Or even better, go to Christian Africa, where if you have epilepsy, you'll be stoned as a witch. Doesn't that sound great? Go to Uganda, Kenya, Nigeria. Those are wonderful places to live. Go over with all of those people. But they wouldn't do it because most of them are closet racists and hate black people. Why don't you go to the Holy Land of Israel and see how well that works out for you with bombs dropping around you? Your religion hasn't profited this world anything. Your religion ruled the world, most of the civilized world, for 1,000 years during the Dark Ages. Why do you think they call them the Dark Ages? Well, if you aborted back then, you were strung up. You were burned. You know, it's a life for a life. These people really upset me. They really rustle my jimmies because they're so ignorant. I think you can tell I'm a little bit worked up. That's not because I'm worried about getting pregnant, obviously. I don't have boobs or ovaries, so I don't have to worry about these things. But don't you think it's a little bit odd that we're in the year 2012 and you're still trying to deny people their civil rights? It makes no sense. It just makes no sense. So stop teaching our children that they'll roast forever if they have premarital sex, because they will. teach them to use a condom instead. Then you don't even have to worry about abortion. So stop being ignorant. Peace out.